Jake Morrison stood outside the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber. The doors were made of some strange blue crystal that seemed to glow from within. He had been through these doors hundreds of times in the past 3 years, but today felt different. Today felt important. He adjusted his formal diplomatic coat one more time. The dark blue fabric with silver trim was designed to look professional but not threatening. Every detail mattered when you were representing all of humanity to 47 different alien species. Amy Foster walked up beside him, carrying a tablet full of documents. She was his assistant and had been working with him since humans first joined the council. Amy was smart, maybe smarter than Jake himself, and she had a talent for reading people, even alien people. "The trade agreements are ready, sir," Amy said quietly. "The medical technology proposals, the terraforming data, and the peacekeeping volunteer lists. Everything the council asked for." Jake nodded and took the tablet from her. 3 years of work was stored in that small device. 3 years of careful negotiations, cultural exchanges, and slowly building trust with species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. While humans were still living in caves. The doors opened with a soft humming sound. Jake and Amy walked into the chamber together. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around a central speaking area. Each species had their own section, designed to accommodate their specific needs. The Xanthari needed dim lighting, so their area was kept dark. The Corvan delegates required high temperatures, so heat lamps warmed their section. The Altarians breathed a different mix of gases, so their seats were enclosed in transparent bubbles. High Counselor Vexthal was already at the central podium. He was Xanthari, which meant he looked somewhat like a very tall, thin human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. When he spoke, his voice had a musical quality that made even harsh words sound pleasant. "Welcome, delegates," Vexthal announced. "We have much to discuss today. The first order of business is a routine motion for resource allocation in the Outer Rim territories." Jake took his seat in the human section. It was smaller than most of the other areas, reflecting humanity's junior status in the council. Only 3 years ago, humans had been completely unknown to the galactic community. Now they were here, trying to prove they belonged among the stars. As Vexthal spoke about resource allocation, Jake noticed something odd. Several of the alien delegates were glancing at each other in a way that seemed planned. The Corvan ambassador, Vecamur, kept looking toward the Xanthari section and then toward the humans. His large, insect-like eyes were hard to read, but Jake had learned to recognize when Vecamur was nervous. Amy leaned over and whispered, "Something's not right." The Corvan delegation requested extra security for today's session. Jake frowned. Extra security was unusual for a routine session. He looked around the chamber and noticed that there were indeed more guards than normal. Not just human security, but guards from several different species. They were positioned near the exits and along the walls. When it came time for the human presentation, Jake walked to the central podium. He had given this speech dozens of times to different groups, but it never got easier. Representing your entire species was a heavy responsibility. "Honored delegates," Jake began, "humanity is proud to present our latest contributions to galactic peace and prosperity." He activated the holographic display and showed images of human hospitals treating alien patients. He displayed data about new farming techniques that could feed hungry populations on desert worlds. He presented plans for peacekeeping volunteers who would help maintain order in troubled systems. "Our medical technology has already saved thousands of lives across 12 different species," Jake continued. "Our terraforming innovations can turn dead worlds into green paradises. Our people are ready to serve the galaxy, not just humanity." The response seemed positive. Several delegates nodded approvingly. The Altarian representative, Councillor Zarlin, even stood up to express her support. "The Altarian Republic believes humanity has shown great promise," she said through her translator device. "We support fast-tracking their application for full council membership." Other voices joined in agreement. The Taragan Republic's delegates spoke about successful joint missions with human forces. The ethereal collective's ancient representative praised human innovation and creativity. Jake felt a wave of relief and pride. 3 years of hard work seemed to be paying off. Humanity was on the verge of becoming a full member of the galactic community, but something still felt wrong. The positive responses seemed too enthusiastic, too coordinated. Jake had learned to trust his instincts during his time in the military before becoming a diplomat. Those instincts were telling him that this was all too good to be true. Amy was busy taking notes on her tablet, but Jake could see her frowning. She had noticed something too. When the session ended, Jake and Amy walked back toward the human embassy. The building was smaller than most of the other diplomatic facilities, but it was home. Earth flags hung alongside the council symbol, and human staff moved through the corridors with purpose. That went well, Amy said, but her voice carried doubt. Too well, Jake replied. Did you notice how many delegates who normally barely acknowledge us suddenly became our biggest supporters? Amy nodded. I've been monitoring communications channels. There's been a lot of encrypted traffic between several delegations, more than usual. Jake stopped walking. What kind of traffic? I don't know yet. The encryption is too strong for me to break quickly, but the timing is suspicious. It all started right after we submitted our membership application. They reached Jake's office, and Amy immediately went to her workstation. Her fingers flew over the keyboard as she pulled up various monitoring programs. Jake watched her work, feeling more uneasy with each passing minute. Jake, Amy said quietly, I'm seeing communication patterns that suggest coordinated activity. Multiple species are talking to each other more than they ever have before. About what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Jake looked out his window at the alien cityscape beyond. Nexus Prime was home to representatives from dozens of species. The architecture was a mixture of styles, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like plants next to others that looked like they were carved from solid metal. For 3 years he had worked to make this place feel like home for humanity. Now he was starting to wonder if they had ever been welcome at all. Amy's computer chimed with an incoming message. She read it quickly and her face went pale. What is it? Jake asked. It's from one of our allies in the Taragan Republic. They're warning us about something, but the message is coded. It's going to take me some time to decode it. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. If their allies were sending coded warnings, then something was very wrong indeed. The successful day at the council suddenly seemed like a trap. But a trap for what? And why would species that had seemed friendly for 3 years suddenly turn against humanity? Jake had a feeling that tomorrow would bring answers he did not want to hear. Jake Morrison woke up to the sound of his door chime ringing repeatedly. He looked at the clock beside his bed and saw that it was barely sunrise on. Nexus Prime, the artificial sun was just beginning to brighten the sky outside his window. He opened the door to find Amy Foster standing there with wild hair and tired eyes. She was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, which meant she had been working all night. Jake, we need to talk, Amy said, pushing past him into his apartment. I decoded the message from the Taragan Republic. It's worse than we thought. Jake quickly made coffee while Amy set up her portable computer on his kitchen table. She had several screens open, all showing different data streams and communication logs. The warning was about a secret meeting, Amy began. 12 species held a private conference yesterday while we were presenting to the council. They weren't there to discuss trade or peace. They were there to discuss us. Jake sat down across from her, his coffee forgotten. What kind of discussion? Amy pulled up a document on her screen. According to our source, they're calling it the human problem. They believe we're dangerous. Dangerous? We've been nothing but helpful for 3 years. That's exactly what they're afraid of. Amy scrolled through the document. They think we're advancing too quickly. They think we're too aggressive, too ambitious. They're scared that we'll become a threat to galactic stability. Jake felt anger building in his chest. We've saved lives. We've shared technology. We've volunteered for peacekeeping missions. How is any of that threatening? Amy turned her screen toward him. Look at this. They have a whole file on human military capabilities. They've been studying our ships, our weapons, our defensive systems. They know exactly how strong we are. Jake looked at the data on the screen. It was detailed information about human military forces, including things that were supposed to be classified. Someone had been spying on humanity for a long time. How did they get this information? That's what I'm trying to figure out. But, Jake, there's more. They have video recordings. Amy opened another file. Jake saw footage of human military exercises, but the images had been edited. Normal training operations were made to look like invasion preparations. Defensive maneuvers were presented as aggressive actions. This is fake, Jake said. I know it's fake. You know it's fake? But they're presenting it as evidence that humanity is planning to attack other species. Jake stood up and began pacing around his small kitchen. Who's leading this? Who's organizing the opposition? High Counselor Vexthal. The Zenthari are the primary force behind it, but they have support from the Corvan Empire and 10 other species. They're calling themselves the Stability Coalition. Stability Coalition, Jake repeated. That's what they're calling their conspiracy, Amy nodded. They believe that removing humanity from the Council will restore balance to the galaxy. They think we're too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous to be trusted with advanced technology. Jake felt sick. 3 years of building relationships, of proving humanity's worth, and it had all been an act. The aliens had been smiling and shaking hands while secretly planning to destroy everything humans had worked for. There's more, Amy continued. They're not just planning to remove us from the Council. They want to restrict human expansion into space. They want to limit our access to technology. They want to isolate us. That would kill our colonies, Jake said. Without trade and support from the Council, our settlements would die. Amy pulled up another document. They know that. They're counting on it. They want to force humanity back to Earth and keep us there. Jake sat back down, his mind racing. When are they planning to do this? Soon? Maybe as early as tomorrow. They're calling for an emergency session to discuss new evidence of human aggression. What new evidence? Amy's face was grim. They're going to claim that the pirate attacks in the Outer Rim are our fault. They're going to say that we're secretly supporting the pirates to destabilize the region. Jake laughed bitterly. That's insane. We've been fighting the pirates. We've lost ships and people protecting Council trade routes. They don't care about the truth. They have manufactured evidence. They have false witnesses. They have everything. They need to convince the Council that humanity is a threat. Jake stood up again and walked to his window. Outside, the city looked peaceful. Aliens and humans walked the streets together. Children from different species played in the parks. It looked like the perfect example of galactic harmony, but it was all a lie. What about our allies? Jake asked. The Altarians seemed supportive yesterday. The Taragan Republic sent us the warning, Amy nodded. A few species are still on our side, but they're afraid to speak up against the coalition. The Zenthari and Corvan are too powerful. Most of our allies are going to stay quiet and let this happen. Jake felt a cold anger settle in his stomach. They're cowards. They're being practical. If they support us, they might be next. The coalition is making it clear that anyone who opposes them will face consequences. Jake turned back to Amy. What are our options? Amy closed her computer and looked at him seriously. We can run. We can quietly withdraw from the Council and hope they leave us alone. We can try to negotiate some kind of compromise, or we can fight back. Fight back how? We expose them. We show the galaxy what they're really doing. We make them face the truth about their conspiracy. Jake considered the options. Running would save lives in the short term, but it would doom humanity to isolation. Negotiating would only give the coalition more time to prepare. Fighting back was dangerous, but it was the only choice that offered real hope. What would we need to fight back? Amy opened her computer again. Evidence, lots of evidence. We need to prove that the coalition is lying. We need to show that they're the ones threatening galactic stability, not us. Do we have that kind of Evidence? Some, but we need more. We need recordings of their secret meetings. We need proof that they manufactured evidence against us. We need to show that they're violating the Council's own laws. Jake sat back down. How long do we have? Not long. Maybe a day, maybe less. The emergency session could be called at any time. Jake looked at his assistant. Amy had been working for humanity's interests for 3 years. She had sacrificed her personal life, her health, and her safety for the dream of humans among the stars. Now that dream was being threatened by lies and betrayal. Okay, Jake said, we fight back. What do you need from me? Amy smiled for the first time since she had arrived. I need you to be ready to give the speech of your life. Because when we expose this conspiracy, you're going to have to stand up in front of the entire galaxy and tell them the truth. Jake nodded. I can do that. Good, because the future of humanity depends on it. As Amy packed up her equipment, Jake looked out his window again. The peaceful city scene looked different now. He could see the hidden tensions, the secret fears, the careful divisions between species that had seemed so united just hours ago. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, humanity would either find its place among the stars or lose it forever. Jake Morrison had never felt more determined in his life. Jake Morrison walked quickly through the corridors of the human embassy. It was early morning, but the building was already busy with activity. Staff members moved between offices with urgent expressions, and the communication center was buzzing with incoming messages from human colonies across the galaxy. Amy Foster met him at the entrance to the secure communications room. She had managed to get a few hours of sleep, but her eyes still showed the strain of the previous night's discoveries. I've been in contact with Admiral Lisa Grant, Amy said as they entered the room. She's moving the fleet to defensive positions, but she's being careful not to provoke the coalition forces. Jake nodded and sat down at the main communication console. The screen showed a map of human space with small blue dots representing colonies and green lines showing trade routes. Red markers indicated where coalition ships had been spotted. How many ships does Lisa have? Jake asked. 47 combat vessels and about 100 support ships. It's not as many as the coalition can field, but our technology is better than they think. Jake activated the secure channel and Admiral Grant's face appeared on the screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been commanding human forces since the early days of space exploration. Jake, she said without preamble, we're seeing increased alien military activity near all our colonies. They're not attacking yet, but they're getting into position. How long can the colonies hold out if they're cut off from supplies? Depends on the colony. New Terra can survive for months. The mining settlements on the outer rim might only last a few weeks. But Jake, if this turns into a shooting war, we're going to lose a lot of people. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Every decision he made could mean life or death for millions of humans living on dozens of worlds. I need you to prepare for the worst, but don't fire the first shot. We're going to try to solve this through diplomacy first. Admiral Grant's expression was skeptical diplomacy. Jake, they're planning to destroy us. Sometimes you have to fight. Maybe, but I want to try my way first. Can you give me time? I'll give you all the time I can. But if they start shooting, we're going to shoot back. Jake closed the communication channel and turned to Amy. What about the evidence? Do we have enough to prove the conspiracy? Amy pulled up files on her tablet. We have the intercepted communications. We have the fake evidence they created. We have testimony from our allies in the Taragan Republic. It's enough to prove they're lying, but I don't know if it's enough to stop them. What about the other species? Are any of them willing to help us? Amy scrolled through her notes. Commander Veltara from the Taragan Republic is on our side. She's been feeding us information about coalition meetings, the ethereal collectives. Representative Sage Quinder has also expressed support, but he's being careful not to take sides publicly. Jake stood up and began pacing. We need more than just evidence. We need to show the galaxy that the coalition is wrong about humanity. We need to prove that we're not the threat they claim we are. How do we do that? By showing them who we really are? By demonstrating human values in front of the entire galaxy? Amy looked confused. What do you mean? Jake stopped pacing and turned to her. The Coalition is afraid of human aggression. They think we're violent and unpredictable. But what if we prove them wrong? What if we show that humans can be peaceful even when we're being attacked? Jake, they're planning to destroy our colonies. This isn't the time for peaceful demonstrations. It's exactly the time. Amy, if we respond with violence, we prove their point. We show the galaxy that humans really are dangerous. But if we respond with truth and dignity, we show them that the Coalition is wrong. Amy was quiet for a moment, considering his words. It's risky. If your speech doesn't work, if the galaxy doesn't believe us, then we'll have lost our chance to defend ourselves. But if it does work, we'll have done something more important than just defending ourselves. We'll have shown the galaxy a better way to resolve conflicts. Jake sat back down and activated another communication channel. This time he contacted the human colonies directly. One by one, the faces of colonial governors appeared on his screen. Helen Brooks from New Terra was the first to respond. She was a strong woman who had helped build the colony from nothing. Jake, we're ready for whatever comes. Our people are scared, but they're not backing down. Captain Ryan Scott from the mining world of Kepler 442 bespoke next. We're seeing Coalition ships in our system. They're not doing anything yet, but they're watching us. Similar reports came from other colonies. The Coalition was moving into position, but they hadn't begun their attack yet. They were waiting for the council session where humanity would be formally accused and expelled. I need all of you to stay calm, Jake told them. I know this is frightening, but we're going to handle this the right way. We're going to prove that humans deserve to be part of the galactic community. After closing the communication channels, Jake spent the rest of the day preparing his speech. He read through council laws and regulations, looking for precedents that the Coalition had violated. He studied the founding principles of the galactic government, principles that the current leadership had forgotten. Amy worked alongside him, organizing evidence and preparing visual displays. They had recordings of Coalition meetings, documents, showing how evidence had been manufactured, and testimony from witnesses who had seen the conspiracy in action. As the day wore on, reports continued to come in from around the galaxy. The Coalition was moving quickly, spreading their version of events to friendly media outlets and sympathetic governments. The story they were telling was simple. Humans were dangerous, humans were aggressive, and humans needed to be stopped before they could hurt anyone. But Jake also received messages of support from unexpected sources. Individual aliens from dozens of different species sent private communications expressing their support for humanity. Many of them had worked with humans and knew that the Coalition's accusations were false. It's not just governments, Amy observed. A lot of ordinary people don't believe the Coalition's story. Jake nodded. That's what we're counting on. When I give this speech, it won't just be to the council delegates. It will be broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of people will hear what I have to say. As evening approached, Jake received word that the emergency council session had been scheduled for the next day. High Counselor Vexthal would present the Coalition's evidence against humanity, and then Jake would have a chance to respond. 1 speech, Amy said. Everything depends on one speech. Jake looked at his notes, pages of facts, figures, and legal arguments. But he knew that facts alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to speak to the hearts of the people listening, not just their minds. Amy, what do you think makes humans different from other species? Amy considered the question. We're stubborn. We don't give up, even when things look impossible. We fight for what we believe in. And what do we believe in? That everyone deserves a chance. That right and wrong matter more than power. That the truth is worth fighting for. Jake smiled. That's what I'm going to tell them. Not just the facts about the conspiracy, but what those facts mean. I'm going to remind them why the council was created in the first place. As night fell on Nexus Prime, Jake Morrison prepared for the most important speech of his life. Tomorrow, He would stand before the galaxy and defend not just humanity, but the principles that made civilization possible, the future of human space. Exploration hung in the balance, but Jake was ready. The council chamber was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. Jake Morrison sat in the human section, watching as High Counselor Vexthal prepared to speak. The Xanthari leader looked confident, almost smug, as he arranged his notes. At the central podium, Amy Foster sat beside Jake, her tablet ready with all the evidence they had gathered. Around them, the atmosphere was tense. Some delegates whispered quietly to each other, while others stared straight ahead with serious expressions. "Honored delegates," Vexthal began, his musical voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "We are here today to discuss a matter of great importance to galactic security. Recent events have shown that the human species poses a significant threat to peace and stability." Jake forced himself to remain calm as Vexthal began presenting the coalition's case. The Xanthari leader displayed images on the chamber's main screen, showing what appeared to be human military exercises. "As you can see," Vexthal continued, "human forces have been conducting aggressive training operations near civilian populations. These exercises appear to be preparations for large-scale military action against other species." Jake recognized the footage. It was from routine defensive drills that the human colonies conducted every few months. But the way it was edited and presented made it look like preparation for an invasion. Vexthal showed more evidence. Communications that had been taken out of context to make human officials sound threatening. Trade data that had been twisted to make human expansion look predatory. Testimony from witnesses who Jake had never heard of, claiming to have seen human ships in places they had never been. Furthermore, Vexthal said, "We have evidence that humans have been secretly supporting pirate activities in the Outer Rim. These attacks on peaceful trade ships are part of a human strategy to destabilize the region." Jake felt anger building in his chest. The pirate attacks had killed hundreds of innocent people, including humans. The accusation was not just false. It was insulting to the memory of those who had died fighting the pirates. For nearly an hour, Vexthal presented his case. Every piece of evidence was false or misleading, but it was presented with such confidence that Jake could see some delegates beginning to look convinced. Finally, Vexthal reached his conclusion. "The evidence is clear. Humanity represents a clear and present danger to galactic peace. We must act now to prevent a catastrophe. I call upon this council to immediately expel the human species from our community and to implement strict limitations on their expansion into space." The chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates nodded in agreement with Vexthal's presentation. Others looked uncertain. A few, like Commander Veltara from the Taragan Republic, appeared openly skeptical. "The human representative will now have an opportunity to respond," Vexthal announced. Though his tone suggested he expected Jake's response to be weak and ineffective, Jake stood up slowly. Every eye in the chamber was focused on him. Beyond the chamber, he knew that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching the broadcast. The future of humanity depended on what he said in the next few minutes. He walked to the central podium, his steps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. For a moment, he looked around at the faces of the delegates. Some showed hostility, others curiosity, and a few showed hope. "Honored delegates," Jake began, his voice steady and clear. "I stand before you today not just as a representative of humanity, but as someone who believes in the principles upon which this council was founded." He paused, letting his words sink in. "High Counselor Vexthal has presented what he claims is evidence of human aggression. I want to address each of these claims directly." Jake activated his own display and showed the original, unedited footage of the human military exercises. "This is the real video of our defensive training. As you can see, our forces were practicing how to protect civilian populations from pirate attacks. There's nothing aggressive about these exercises." He continued methodically through each piece of evidence, showing how it had been altered or taken out of context. The communications that sounded threatening were actually discussions about humanitarian aid. The trade data that looked predatory was actually evidence of fair and beneficial exchanges. As for the accusation that humans support pirate activities, Jake said, his voice growing stronger, I would like to remind the Council that human ships have been on the front lines of fighting these pirates. We have lost ships and crew members, protecting Council trade routes. The suggestion that we would support the very criminals who have killed our people is not just false, it is deeply offensive. Jake could see that his words were having an effect. Some delegates were looking uncomfortable, realizing that they had been misled. But he was not finished. But I am not here simply to defend humanity against false accusations, Jake continued. I am here to expose a conspiracy that threatens the very foundation of this council. The chamber fell completely silent. Even Vexthal looked surprised by Jake's boldness. For months, a group calling itself the Stability Coalition has been meeting in secret, Jake announced. They have been planning to remove humanity from the Council, not because we are dangerous, but because they are afraid of what we represent. Jake activated Amy's recordings of the coalition meetings. The sound of Vexthal's voice filled the chamber as he spoke about the need to contain humanity before they became too powerful. They are afraid of human potential, Jake said. They are afraid that we will challenge their control over the galaxy. So they have decided to destroy us through lies and deception. The chamber erupted in chaos. Coalition delegates shouted denials while others demanded explanations. But Jake's voice cut through the noise. This conspiracy is not just an attack on humanity, he declared. It is an attack on everything this council claims to stand for. When the council was founded, it was based on the principle that all species deserve equal treatment. It was based on the idea that differences should be settled through discussion, not through lies and threats. Jake looked directly at Vexthal, who was now visibly angry. But the coalition has abandoned these principles. They have chosen to use fear and deception instead of honest debate. They have violated the very laws they claim to uphold. Jake turned to address the entire chamber. I ask you to consider what this means. If the coalition can manufacture evidence to destroy humanity today, what is to stop them from doing the same to any other species tomorrow? If they can ignore council laws when it suits them, then what protection do any of us have? His voice grew passionate as he continued. The coalition claims they want stability, but they are the ones creating chaos. They claim they want peace, but they are the ones threatening war. They claim they want to protect the galaxy, but they are the ones tearing it apart. Jake paused, letting his words echo through the chamber. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but determined. Humanity will not accept expulsion based on lies. We will not abandon our colonies to satisfy the coalition's fear and paranoia. We will not bow to threats from those who have betrayed the principles they swore to defend. Jake looked around the chamber one final time. If this council wants to destroy humanity, they will have to do it honestly. They will have to admit that they are abandoning justice in favor of power. They will have to explain to the galaxy why they chose fear over truth. Jake stepped back from the podium. The choice is yours. But whatever you decide, the galaxy will remember what happened here today. They will remember who stood for justice and who chose lies. They will remember who defended the weak and who served the powerful. The chamber was completely silent as Jake returned to his seat. The delegates stared at him in shock, many of them realizing for the first time the full implications of what the coalition had done. High Counselor Vexthal stood at the podium, his confident demeanor completely gone. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain and afraid. Jake Morrison had done more than defend humanity. He had challenged the entire power structure of the galaxy, and everyone watching knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the council chamber lasted for nearly a full minute after Jake Morrison finished speaking. Then slowly the room began to erupt. Delegates jumped to their feet, some shouting in anger, others in support. The careful order of the galactic government was falling apart before everyone's eyes. High Counselor Vexthal tried to restore control, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Commander Veltara from the Taragan Republic was on her feet, demanding that the coalition explain their secret meetings. Other delegates were pulling out their communication devices, frantically contacting their home governments. Amy Foster leaned over to Jake. The broadcast is reaching every corner of the galaxy. We're getting reports of demonstrations on dozens of worlds. Jake watched the chaos around him with grim satisfaction. His speech had accomplished exactly what he had hoped. The conspiracy was exposed, and the galaxy was responding. Within hours, the first reports began arriving. On the industrial world of Kepler 186f, workers from 5 different species had walked off their jobs, demanding answers from their governments about the Coalition's actions. On the trade hub of Proxima Station, alien merchants were refusing to do business with Xanthari and Corvan companies, but the most significant developments were happening in space. Admiral Lisa Grant contacted Jake with urgent news. 3 Corvan battle groups just turned around and headed home, she reported. Their crews are refusing to follow orders to attack human colonies. We're seeing similar situations with Xanthari forces. Jake felt a wave of relief. What about the other Coalition species? Mixed results. Some are still following orders, but others are hesitating. Your speech has created doubt among their military forces. Nobody wants to be part of what they're starting to see as an unjust war. The next few days brought a cascade of changes. Several species formally withdrew from the Coalition, publicly stating that they had been misled about humanity's intentions. The Altarian Republic announced their full support for human membership in the Council. Even some Xanthari and Corvan officials began speaking out against their own governments on Xanthari Prime. The homeworld of the Coalition's leaders, massive protests filled the streets. Citizens who had been told that humans were dangerous were now seeing the truth about their government's deception. They demanded the resignation of High Counselor Vexthal and his supporters. Jake spent those days in constant communication with human colonies, alien allies, and news organizations across the galaxy. The story was too big to contain, and every new revelation made the Coalition look worse. The Corvan Empire is collapsing, Amy reported during one of their briefings. 3 of their major worlds have declared independence. They're saying they won't be part of a government that starts wars based on lies. Jake nodded, but he felt no satisfaction in the Coalition's suffering. What about their people? Are they safe? Mostly. The transitions have been peaceful so far. It seems like most people just want honest leadership. The transformation wasn't limited to Coalition worlds. Across the galaxy, species that had been quiet for generations were finding their voices. The small, peaceful ethereal collective formally proposed new council reforms that would prevent secret coalitions from forming. The Taragan Republic suggested creating an independent body to investigate claims of aggression before any military action could be taken, but the most important change was happening among ordinary people. Humans and aliens who had worked together but never truly trusted each other were now forming deeper relationships. The crisis had shown them that they shared common values that were more important than their differences. Jake received a message from Helen Brooks on New Terra. Jake, you need to see this. We have aliens from 12 different species volunteering to help defend our colony. They're saying that an attack on humanity is an attack on justice itself. Similar reports came from other human settlements. Alien civilians were arriving to help with defense preparations, bringing supplies and offering technical assistance. Some were even requesting permission to stay permanently, saying they wanted to be part of communities that valued truth over power. The Council itself was forced to change. With the Coalition's credibility destroyed and several species demanding reforms, emergency elections were called. High Counselor Vexthal resigned in disgrace, and Sage Quender from the Ethereal Collective was chosen as interim leader 3 months after Jake's speech. The new council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership. But more importantly, they passed the Morrison Reforms, a series of laws named after Jake that required transparency in all council proceedings and created legal protections for species that exposed corruption. Jake stood once again at the central podium of the council chamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of hostility and suspicion, he felt respect and partnership from the assembled delegates. 6 months ago, Jake began, humanity came to this chamber asking for acceptance. Today we stand here as full members of a galactic community that has chosen truth over lies, justice over power, and hope over fear. He looked around at the faces of the delegates, seeing representatives from species that had been enemies just months before. The crisis we faced together taught us something important. It showed us that our differences are not what define us. What defines us is our choice to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Jake paused, thinking about all the people who had made this moment possible. Amy Foster, who had worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. Admiral Lisa Grant, who had kept the peace while others called for war. The brave aliens who had risked their careers and safety to support justice. But this is not the end of our work, Jake continued. It is the beginning. We have built something new here, something better than what came before. Now we must prove that we deserve it. In the months that followed, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had expected. New alliances formed based on shared values rather than military power. Scientific cooperation accelerated as species shared knowledge more freely. Even former coalition worlds began to prosper as they rebuilt their governments around principles of transparency and justice. Jake Morrison had started as a simple diplomat trying to secure humanity's place in the galaxy, but his fiery reply to the Council's betrayal had done something much more important. It had reminded an entire galaxy what it meant to be civilized. The speech that was meant to destroy humanity had instead transformed the galaxy. And as Jake looked out at the stars from his office window, he knew that this was only the beginning of what could be accomplished when people chose courage over comfort, truth over convenience, and justice over power. Humanity had not just found its place among the stars. It had helped the stars find their way back to the light.